Well, here we are.
Here we are.
Here we are. All right. So we're talking today to Maria Marinou. Um,
Marino.
that's right. And so we've talked about. I don't know how much you know about the format of the show that we're doing right now, but basically these interviews are a companion to standalone episodes that we do. So the episode that, or the theme that we're talking about right now is art, right? Which is obviously why we picked you. So, so my question for you, I guess, why don't we start by just, talking a little bit about your background and your relationship with art, because you are probably the most successful, best artist that I know. So
You don't know many then.
Probably not as many as you do. All right, but I mean,
But thank you.
I think that you are exceptional in terms of what you've been able to do in the realm of the arts, and it's always very deeply impressive to me whenever anybody can actually turn their artistic skill into money, which you've been able to do. So why don't you let
I
us know?
appreciate this very much. Thank you.
Yeah, no. It's true though. I mean, so how did you get involved, and when did you start producing art? Was this something that goes all the way back to when you were a little kid, or did this come to you later in life?
Definitely since I can remember myself.
Mm.
And so I was very lucky because uh, my family environment, let's say, never stopped me of doing this.
Mm.
So in fact, they did quite the opposite. And so since I can remember myself, I was involved with this practice, basically.
So very early memories of sitting down and drawing and painting and all of the rest. Or
Yes.
was there
Yes.
one that attracted you to it, or was there one instance that got you involved, or?
Like, how do you mean?
Well, I mean, for example, right? Like, I can remember my experience with art. It has been, if one, I guess, artistic pursuit had an interest for me, it would have been like photography. So I remember being, a little kid, maybe like, I don't know, 3 or 4 years old or whatever, and walking around with a camera and, taking pictures like that. Was it something like that, or was it something like, when children are given like coloring books, you were just like, oh, this is it. I mean,
I
or
think it
do you
was the
have?
latter. It was the latter
Yeah.
because I don't have like an earliest memory of first being implicated with painting. It's like I don't have a specific one. It's just happened since I can remember myself.
So it's always been there.
Yeah, of course, of course, of course.
Wow. So okay, so we should probably give our audience here a little bit of background. So can you tell us a little bit about where did you grow up, and what was your childhood like in the
Right.
environment that you grew up in? Yeah.
So I was born in Athens, Greece, in 1986, in a region of Attica called Agia Nargiri. And I went to school there, and I lived there for 30 years until I moved to Britain in 2016,
Mm-hmm.
basically. And my background was, I don't know how to, it's just like a normal Athenian background, okay? So I went to school there, and then we have our own house in Athens, so the family was all together, and my neighborhood is mostly, so, every neighbor has their own house, so it's like local stuff, basically. For me, it's just a generic Athenian environment.
Mm.
I don't believe it was something special, apart from the fact that my family was always interested in arts and history and archaeology and would give us like little triggers, let's say. Plant the seed, like you say. So we are able to cultivate these things further.
Now, when it's funny that you mentioned that, right? About your family being interested in art and history and so on and so forth. Do you find, just because it is a little bit rarer to be able to be talking to somebody who has experienced both sides, right? So meaning that, you've experienced what society, culture and everything else is like in Athens and in,
Can you repeat the question, because I lost the connection?
Sorry. Oh, okay. No, I'm sorry. No, I'm saying it's interesting that you say that your family had an interest in art and history and this kind of thing. Do you find that is more common in Greece than it is in a place like England, or are they about the same?
I don't know. What I have seen up to now in Britain is that the structure of the whole learning process is much different to what it is in Greece. That doesn't make it better or worse, of course. And then again, I don't actually know how the other, Greek families would have been treating their children, and if that interests were similar or not. I don't think there's something that I have looked into in detail, let's say, because for me that was the norm. So I never, I never stopped and thought, oh, wait a minute, what's happening, at that family? Should we compare it? It's not something that I thought as a growing older. But you always hear stories about, people at your age saying that, oh, I want to go to this university, study these things, but my parents don't let me because they want me to be a lawyer or a doctor. If that's what you mean, yes, definitely. But I think when it comes to my family, it was always important for the children to choose something they like, because if they did, then they would have more possibilities to do it the best they can, basically. So if you have a job that you don't really like, it doesn't matter if your mother or your father likes it. For you, it could be a torture,
Exactly. Yeah, that's very interesting that you say that, because this is part of the argument that I make. Well, I mean, as you know, part of the argument that I make for why people should get involved in classics and in history and the humanities in general is, specifically for those reasons, right? I mean, you could theoretically, for those who have the capacity to suffer, if you want to sit there and suffer through a law degree, you could, and then you could come out at the end and you could be a terrible lawyer. Versus doing something that you really care about and then really pursuing that to the fullest. But I'm curious here for a second. You mentioned that you can see that there's major differences between the Greek education system and the way that it is in the UK. I wonder if you couldn't give us a little bit more detail about what are those details, or what are those differences that you notice, that you perceive?
I think it's the structure of the school system, if this is even a word to describe it, basically, because like in Greece, you would start elementary school for 6 years, and then another 6 years would be gymnasium, and I don't know, how do you say this in English? Like Lyceum, okay? Mm-hmm. I don't know. Like another 6 years of gymnasium or something. But here the structure is a little bit different, so you don't have to be 18 to finish school. You can leave it when you are 16 years old, and then try to follow a craft. And then if you want to return back to education, you have more opportunities to do so, which you don't easily have in Greece. I mean, then again, I've graduated in 2004 from high school. I don't know what's happening now. So this is just my experience when I was at school.
Mm. So
yeah, go on.
No, continue, please.
No, it's just, and I think schools here, I feel that they give more opportunity to a person to cultivate what they really like, but at the same time, they want more from you. Like you study all the time. That's my take on this, and maybe I'm mistaken. I don't know, But from what I figured, because I have friends that are teachers at different levels in British schools, I've gathered that it's different and it's more difficult here. But for me also free time is important, So I don't know. That's why I said before, I don't know if it's better or not. It's just different.
Yeah, more of like a, for lack of a better term, like a work-life balance kind of thing, right? Like it's...
Yes. But then again, I will not state this with certainty because I don't have a personal experience here. And it's been more than 10 years since I had my last school experience in Greece.
Mm. Well, I wonder if you couldn't, take us back a little bit because, this is something that is also very interesting to me. Is in countries like Greece and in countries like Italy, when you are sort of sitting on top of, a major historical heritage, let's say, how much of that actually is sort of communicated to you from the elementary school level forward? Is it something that comes up all the time, or is it something that's, you spend most of your time doing, math and science, but, they just sort of tell you, oh yeah, by the way, you live in Athens. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it comes up a lot of times. Now, for many, this would be part of state trying to cultivate the Greekness in the citizens, okay, which is like not very good, let's say, because it might lead to other trajectories. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily think that it's wrong to know about your city and the history of the country you happen to be born in, that's your heritage. Definitely, it shouldn't be cultivated for reasons that would be worse than patriotic, for the lack of a better word at the moment. But it's very interesting always to have a connection with your environment because all the environments are historical. And it seems to me that the more you know about the place, the more you understand it. And I do believe that learning the history of a place as growing up is part of this. So you understand the place and its people. So
does this kind of historical background, I mean, I think it's wrong to say indoctrination, right? But I mean, and I do appreciate the point that you could sort of take knowledge of history and culture, and you could go down some very like dark paths with it, right? I mean, there's that we have this as well, where if you were so inclined, right? There are many examples of just throughout history, but even in the modern day, of small groups of people getting together and deciding that they are the inheritors of they're looking for like a white ethno state. I mean, there's all kinds of crazy ideas that exist that you could sort of like misuse this material, but I also think that for the people who do try to do that, they almost always have a distorted or weird view, which is not necessarily based on a careful analysis of the history that they're pointing to, but it's usually
yes, most definitely
like a weird idealized distortion, right?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So, but I mean, this is not necessarily what we're talking about when we're talking about your education at the elementary school level.
Oh no, I just wanted to make this disclaimer, basically.
Sure. Oh no, yeah, no.
Because you can have things like this, right? For me, it was a very good trigger to have this, and a trigger which is also cultivated by my family, basically, because every Sunday we would go to this museum or that museum with my mother and go around and have all of these images of past cultures, which were, for me, it was something of a shock and awe. I was like, wow, look at this. I want to know more. It's so interesting. Who made those sculptures? Okay, who created those pots? Why do they look like this? Where were these things exhibited? For what reason? So you have all of these questions, and being able to visit the museum that easily and do this as a repetitive process because you're so interested in, I think helps you realize that I have a genuine interest about this.
And
you can never get bored. I mean, I can't.
I know the feeling, right? So, I mean, I can definitely relate, because there are, it is the kind of thing where, it's almost like, I don't know, like you can dig as deep as you want, and there's always something else, right?
Yeah, of course.
There's always, but not every field is like that, though, right? Because I mean, there are sort of, other disciplines out there where you can hit the bottom of it and go, oh, okay, well, that's, now I've reached the end.
Like weight, for example.
Well, I'll give you the example that I like to that I always like to point to would be something like if you wanted to study physics, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can get to the end of our understanding of physics, right? You can actually reach a point where the only way to go in physics is to learn something new or discover something new or invent new physics. But there's no guarantee that you actually will do that, right? Meaning that, you can reach the limits of human understanding of physics, and then you can say, from this point, this is what we think is going to happen, or, it would be great if we could do this other experiment, or, so on and so forth. But the great unknown out there is sort of, you're an astronaut from that point, right? You're exploring, something that is totally, I guess just a big black hole, right? Whereas in the classics or in archaeology or anything like this, it seems like wherever you go, and whatever project you get involved in, the answer is always going to be more archaeology is going to change your understanding of what the past actually was. Meaning that it's like the field itself is just is constantly the interpretation of things that should be pretty well understood don't necessarily remain pretty well understood with new evidence and things like this. I mean, or maybe maybe this is sort of a game of semantics here. Maybe what I'm saying is, you could make the argument either way for physics or for archaeology. I don't know.
I think it applies to most of the disciplines, because the more research you have, the more you can talk about it, and the more this research broadens your horizon of how you perceive these things. And of course, in archaeology and in history, the narrative might change, and change in a way because as a community we move forward, and then you might say that you have gotten rid of your bias, but you can never do that completely. And that's where new ideologies come with new biases, more contemporary, even if people say, oh, this is a non-biased research towards this and that. I don't think you can get rid of this, but the more you acknowledge it, the better it would be for the reader, the viewer, the next third person that wants to understand what's happening, because they will take this into consideration, and that's important.
Mm. So, do you, in your view, then, do you see fields like this, like history and archaeology and classics and all the rest? Do you see this as being something that where we can actually make an advancement and move towards a more perfect understanding, or is even the attempt, sort of like a foolish attempt? I mean, and then how do you even define it, right? I mean, I almost think to myself that and I'll give you a quick example of this, right? Is I like to think about the Parthenon frieze, right? Why so detailed? And why would you even, and this has sort of gone back and forth, through scholarship all the time. And, there's a very funny picture I saw once in a textbook of, the ancient Athenians, right after the Persian War, are standing up on like scaffolding, and they have like a torch, and they're like standing right in front of the Parthenon frieze, like examining it, right? When in reality, I think it's pretty impossible to think that, that wasn't the intention, right, of putting that up there, and maybe, we're making such a big deal about it because we have it. And it is so, such an iconic thing, and it has influenced art and everything else, art and sculpture and architecture, for centuries thereafter. So maybe, it's important to us in a way that it wasn't important to them. So are we ever going to be able to put ourselves back in the mindset of those people, of Phidias and, the other.
I don't know. Why would you say that the importance between the past and the present is different, though?
Meaning that they're just different. They're not one is not more important than the other.
Oh yeah, but the same thoughts that you have when you look at this frieze, it doesn't mean that another person 2000 years ago wouldn't have the same thoughts. They might have many more that are different, but apart from this being an exquisite piece of sculpture, there is also a way to communicate wealth, or a symbol to communicate other things like Athens rules. We are so amazing. Look at us. All sorts of propagandas can be, explained through. Well, that's of course my view, but I think there are, these things are an amalgamation of meanings, basically.
Yeah. No, I see what you mean. Right. There is an idea that, political messaging and propaganda needs to be wrapped in something that's like very appealing and very,
Yes, because otherwise you wouldn't pay attention to it. Okay.
Right. That's a good
and so
point.
it's also advertisement.
Mm-hmm.
You advertise who you are. You advertise how far you've reached your community, your wealth, how educated you are. Look at me, I'm doing those sculptures. Oh my God, I'm the best sculptor in the world. I'm amazing, I'm unbeatable. My art is fantastic.
Do you have any memories of when the first time that you went to the Acropolis was? I mean, and what kind of effect it had on you? I mean,
I was, I think, I don't know, third year of elementary school, if not earlier. I remember it was extremely hot because we went in June, and the weather have changed a bit, but not that much. You will still have those massive heat waves during the summer. The memory I have is that this bright sunlight being reflected in my face from the marbles and the surrounding. That's my memory, basically. But I also have a memory when I first visited the Mycenae.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I went to this to the entrance basically with the two lions. Okay, that I remember very distinctly because it was so massive, and I was so tiny.
Do you remember how old you were?
I think when we went to the Mycenae and I first walked through the Lion Gate, maybe I was like third grade or something. I don't know.
So maybe like 9-10 years old, something like
that.
Yeah,
because it was a school trip and we went with our parents. So we visited Mycenae and then we went to Epidavros to visit the site there and see the theater. Again, amazing experience. These are from the things you won't forget because you're so, shocked. You don't expect this. And if you're lucky enough and you have a good tour guide, it makes the experience worth it. So as a child, these are memories that stay in your brain forever.
So, this is fascinating to listen to just because, the counterexample to what you're talking about that we have in the United States anyway would be doing things like going to Civil War battlefields, or we do have museums and things like this and history museums and art museums and all the rest. But especially if you depending on what part of the country that you're growing up in, there is no real equivalent, right, to being 3 years old and going to the Lion's Gate of Mycenae, or seeing any of these like major, you know, like cultural heritage sites like this. There are certain natural phenomenon that we have, in the, like, geological formations and things like that, like going to the Grand Canyon is pretty great. And I know that actually does have an impact on people. I know a couple of geologists who got deep into geology because they visited the Grand Canyon when they were about that age. And I always wondered, does it really, it certainly doesn't have that effect on everybody, right? It's not that everybody that was in your tour group went on to become, professional artists and to be deeply influenced by. Definitely not. Yeah, but it does seem to leave a mark, right? Just in terms of your consciousness and in terms of your what you are interested in and what you're interested in pursuing from that point.
Oh yeah, definitely. And then when you return home with these images and your family environment cultivates that more, and they tell you, well, if you like it, go for it. It's amazing. It's a fantastic thing to happen, because you know that your background supports you, right? So you find the courage to move on and to move further.
Yeah, that's incredible. So, all right, so all of the ingredients were there very early on, right? Did you find yourself drawing when you started to really take art seriously? Did you find yourself drawing on classical examples a lot, a little bit, or was this something?
A lot. Okay. So, funny thing. When I finished high school, I didn't know of the existence of the Athens School of Fine Arts because no one bothered to tell us about it. So, and also because it has a different system of examination, so different exams to go into the schools, and not through the pan-Hellenic examination process, if you want. Okay, so I had no idea. And then a friend of mine, which was also a professor of mine that taught me architectural drawing, told me, well, have you heard about this school? What are you doing? You need to start preparation. And I was like, what? Does this even exist? Yeah, I'm very interested. And so I did 3 years of preparatory drawing in a studio near Exarchia in Athens, in order to learn, because the Athens School of Fine Arts examination process is through charcoal and pencil drawing and still nature. And so the way we learned drawing was through creating drawings of a replica Roman and ancient Greek sculpture that the studio had. It was like the classical way of doing so, right? Uh-huh. So you would go in and you have a head of Alexander, like a head of Athena Nike, a head of Odysseus, a head of Heracles, and so on and so forth. So through this drawing process, you would taught the academic ways, let's say. And then every September, you would give exams to enter the Athens School of Fine Arts. And I got in with the third. So I was cut 2 times, basically.
So it's competitive. You have to actually really, you have to really know your stuff to get in there, yeah?
It's very competitive. Every year, and up to then, again, because it's been, like, I started in 2007, so many, many years ago. They would take 10% of the applicants. So let's say if you are 800 people, they would take 80 or something.
Wow.
So very, very little amount. And you had people from all of Greece and Cyprus that were applying to enter to the school. So it was like many candidates.
Wow. And everybody is in there, so it's the even in the examination process, the classical example is baked into it. I mean, it's like, and then once you start the training, does that continue, or do they ever encourage you and say, okay, well, now you can be like, Picasso and do all this modern type?
when you enter the school, they discourage you from continuing in this manner. And whether you like it or not, they don't care. Because I think artistically in Greece, and I take full responsibility for saying this, 80% of Greek artists are stuck in the, I don't know, post-war art that was produced in the free part of Germany, let's say. And that was, we have never recovered from that, you know. The world moves on. You visit countries like the US and UK and many other countries up in the north, and you see that people have found a new interest in realism and academic drawing, which for me is really important because it's part of classical training. I'm not saying that that's the only training, but it's important to understand how form works, how light works, how shadow works, okay? Even if you don't proceed to do realism for the rest of your life. But I think in Greece, art has followed a weird trajectory. I hope this changes soon, but I don't think so. And which I'm not very fond of, basically, because you have to follow, you know, the contemporary doctrine of what galleries want in Athens. And if you don't get into the circle, you will never sell anything because they don't like your work because they cannot sell it or whatever. I don't know, really. That is just my take on it. It doesn't mean that another person's experiences would be the same. But when I was trying to introduce my stuff, let's say it didn't work very well. So.
I see. So why do you think then that this sort of, when we say classical tradition, right, or you know, thinking back to that entrance exam, you know, this kind of style, I guess, this style of figure drawing, right? You're drawing specifically sculpture from a very kind of narrow time period, isn't that right?
Or, you know, it's not really like
yes.
you're drawing.
Okay.
Okay, well, you're not drawing Cycladic figurines, no.
Right.
You could if you wanted to, but you're drawing from early archaic to late Roman. Basically, that's what you're drawing. You also have life models that you also do, and then, I mean, I'm not sure why this happens, but I think there's a reason why we call it the classical period. So there are some substantial artistic peaks, let's say, that one can find there. They're not the only ones. We can see that every period has its artistic peak. But for some reason, they have been established as the classical thing to do. So there you have, that's my take. I don't know. If I could explain it, that's what I would say.
Yeah, no, I think it does remain a little bit mysterious, right? Why, you know, why the Parthenon frieze? Why are we so, you know, enamored with, you know, or that style of sculpture? I mean, you know, the example that comes to my mind anyway is it's the statue that's in the Vatican of Laocoon and his sons being eaten by the snakes. You know, it's like that style is very evocative, and it's, you know, and it is like what I think of when I think of like classical art.
Well,
yeah.
To interrupt you, I'm sorry for
please,
that.
no,
but it's interesting because you say you're so drawn to this, but if you think about it, it's, so you began from a period, the archaic period, where things start becoming very realistic, right? So you have like the representation of the human body as it is in like real life. And this is the first time that happens, and it's important. And so you see something that you can relate to, basically. Then if you move, so if we talk about the sculpture of Laocoon, for instance, it's like a little bit more than realistic. I don't know if calling it hyper-realistic would necessarily be a term that we could apply to it, but they have some features of this sculpture. You'll see that they are exaggerated. And so I think we are, as human beings, we are drawn to this, basically.
Yeah.
And I think that's why.
Yeah.
It's the realism of it. It's the exaggeration of the realism itself as well.
Yeah, it's maybe like larger than life, or like the the proportions are like unnaturally, perfect and good, right? Yeah, I know what you mean. It's that, but you actually took a lot of inspiration not just from this time period of sort of, the Greco-Roman heyday here, but you also have actually spent a lot of time working with like medieval type techniques and even the archaic or I guess the Bronze Age techniques from the from the Cycladic period and beyond that. I mean, so if you could give us a little bit of of background, right, or a little bit of I mean, I have a story in my head that I'm thinking of, right? And it was it's your use of pigments and making your own pigments and paints, and it's fascinating how you do that. So I mean,
I think how the story began was that while I was studying at the Athens School of Fine Arts, I wanted to enhance the material properties of my colors, basically, and my canvas and my surfaces and everything, because I fell in love with the intensity of colorants, okay? So I wanted to produce something more intense that would withstand the test of time, and that's why I started reading those things. And then I got the virus. And so, you read about 1600s and the materials and techniques that were applied at that point, and then you say, but what happened earlier? And then you keep asking that question, and then you reach prehistory at some point.
Spoken like a classicist, huh?
Oh my God.
Wow. All right. So and in addition to all of your artistic pursuits, you also have an archaeological background as well. How did that come about exactly? Where how did you make the pivot from the one to the other?
Well, you were there.
I was there.
So when I graduated from ASFA, Athens School of Fine Arts, okay, I applied twice for. So the university that I studied is a compulsory 5-year attendance uni. Okay. In Greece, that doesn't count as a master's degree, although abroad it would. Mm-hmm. And so after that, they created another master's department that you had to spend 2 years studying to get a master's of the Athens School of Fine Arts. And so I applied there twice. I don't believe I had really good applications, but up to that point, I wasn't sure exactly how to apply, let's say, right? Because what we have been doing up to that point was something really, with something that involved personal labor and, painting, sculpture, pottery, engraving. And I wasn't sure how to create an application, but I did my best at the time. I tried twice and I failed. And then I thought to myself, well, now that I'm free of this, and this year I don't want to try anymore because I don't see light at the end of the tunnel pertains to that matter. What else can I do, which I really love? And then I was like, I really like archaeology, I really like history. I would like to know more about the subject, and I have the time to do so. So how do you do such thing? And so at that point, I think it was 2014 or 15 or something, there was a two-month summer course offered by Kapodistrian University of Athens, which was called Archaeology and Cultural Heritage or something like that, and it was offered for free. So I applied for this course, and they took me. And there I met many people, which were historians and archaeologists. And what we were taught mostly on this course was history and not archaeology. But I was very interested in how do one excavates? What is this? How do you do it? What knowledge do you need to have in order to, excavate something which is like archaeological or whatever? And so I met one girl from there, and she told me, "Oh, did you know that the American school?" I was, "What? The American school? It's inside the Agora, the Store of Athens, right?" I was like, "Oh." And so they still excavate the ancient Agora, and they take volunteers every summer. And I was like, "What?" He was like, "Yeah, of course. Here's the site. Have a look. You need to have a look next month because they're gonna update for the next summer applications." And I'm like, "Okay." And I had a look, and I think I missed the deadline for that summer because it was already July or something. But the following winter, which was end of 2015 and the beginnings of 2016, I kept looking on American school webpage until I saw the applications opening again. So I applied, and I got accepted. And I went at the Store of Athens, and I was interviewed by John Camp. And I started excavating at the first week of June next summer, where I met you.
And the rest, as they say, is history, right?
And the rest is history and archaeology.
And archaeology. It's true. So basically, the answer is that it was purely through your own interest that you got involved, right? And it is possible to do so, right? It is possible to go in and to get involved in archaeology as easy as that, which is, I think, an important, point.
It is, as long as these opportunities exist.
Yes. Well, and actually, it's funny you mentioned that, because this is actually this topic is sort of near and dear to I guess the whole point of this podcast. And we are going to we're going to dedicate an episode to that very topic. It's the endangered species that this is becoming, right? And the lack of opportunity as we go forward. And
good luck with that.
I don't know that this is actually going to do anything one way or the other in terms of stopping the backslide. I don't know that anybody can do anything.
Whoever's going to participate at this podcast, at least they're going to have a good rant. Very important.
Fair enough. Yes. I think we'll all have a good rant, and we'll, at least we'll feel better at the end of it. So this sort of now brings me to another question. And this is in service of, I believe it's episode 3 of the podcast, where we talk about the Elgin marbles, right?
Oh, yeah. I've listened to that.
Yes.
Very interesting episode.
Yes. So I know that this subject is very near and dear to you, as it is to many people in Greece. But what are your initial thoughts, and what are what exactly is you I think are in a particularly interesting position, having come from Greece and now living in the UK. So if you want to go and see the marbles, you can go to London. And
I have it. Fun.
So what goes through your mind while you're standing there?
So if we want to be, me as well, I'm gonna try to get rid of my bias. Okay, now because it's important. However, my argument is the following. This is part of something, and this is part of a structure that is still standing. It's not a remnant of a temple that was, broken down to pieces 5,000 years ago. It is a monument that is still in place, and therefore it's only logical that all parts of this monument rest in the same, at least museum, if not the same building itself, basically. We can go into the politics of that and how these things, and if these things, and when these things were taken by force from Greece, and who sold them to whom, and who gave permission, but I'm not gonna do it.
That's okay. I've done it for you already, I think. So it's like, no, but the reason I ask, right, is because, again, this is something that I think is very difficult for people who don't have a background in archaeology or a background in art and art history. It's difficult for them to wrap their head around, because if you're coming to this, if you're coming to the debate, and you're coming to the debate from a position where you don't even know what the Elgin marbles are, so first you have to learn what they are, and then you have to, sort of find out about the whole controversy, and you have to go step by step, and and sort of re-educate, and then if you're an English speaker, more likely than not, you're getting the British understanding of what happened there. It puts you in a difficult position to actually understand that this kind of cultural heritage, like what we're talking about here, this is really for everybody. This is not as sort of limiting an idea as saying this belongs to country X or this belongs to country Y, right? The argument that you're making, which I think is a good one, is that if the monument is still standing, why wouldn't we do everything in our power to restore the monument to put all of the pieces together and put it back into a coherent whole, and then can't we all enjoy it where it belongs, right, in the one place? And it's not like you're in a situation there where the monument is going to be like mishandled or mistreated or something like this, right? I mean, the amount of expertise and the amount of time and attention that Greece as a country pays to archaeology and to cultural heritage, I think, is more than average.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. More than the United States does, I would say. Right.
I think more than anyone. Yeah. It's like,
So it is still a big deal, is what I'm saying. Yeah.
It is a big deal, but I endorse it when it is a big deal for the good reasons, basically.
Yeah.
That's when I like it. Now, if we talk about, look, first we need to remember that Lord Elgin was Scottish, not English. Okay, it's important. Because sometimes people think about that the bodies are down from the border, down from Hadrian's Wall, okay, but not necessarily. So, and also, if we talk, and this is again my personal take, if we talk about how British Museum has taken all the antiquities that are of interest and concentrated them in London. And if you have a look at what they've done inside Britain, they've done exactly the same. So you have an amazing Saxon, I think, cross, which is like carved in stone, which was found in Yorkshire, if I'm not mistaken. But the British Museum took it for themselves and created the replica to have to Yorkshire museums. And I'm like, what they do internationally, they also do internally.
So at least they're consistent.
Yes. But it's still, like, come on, have you been to the British Museum?
I have a long time ago, but I have, yeah.
Honestly, you can give some stuff back to countries, and that does not include only Greece. Okay, many other countries that have, these objects for some countries have a very deep symbolism for their history, for their culture, and I think they would be grateful forever. They would be friends of the museum if there was such thing to happen. But I think the argument is that we are such an international museum, so many thousands of visitors, which is true. But you need to understand that these things, these artifacts, reached that museum through processes that were categorically colonial, either we like it or not. Okay, and so you need to realize that as a museum, if you keep this, there are things to be said about.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
behavior.
Yeah. No, I think I know exactly what you're talking about. It's always been an interesting debate for me to engage with, coming from the United States and coming from my, obviously my childhood, in the US. We have such a bad track record when it comes to historical preservation. So let me give you another example. And I remember being very, very impressed by this. I suppose negatively impressed by this when I saw it the first time. But, one of the sort of like the myths that we grow up with, or that at least that I grew up with in the United States, is the story of the Boston Massacre. Which is really the very beginning of the American Revolution from from Great Britain. And we're sort of taught this story of the Boston Massacre, and you learn about and you sort of see how there's like woodcut prints that were made from the time where it shows the redcoats are all lined up in a big line, and they're shooting into the crowd, and they're killing everybody, and they're this and the other thing. And then of course, later on you find out it wasn't like that at all, right? They were not marching in lockstep or anything. It sounds like it was really just, the troops that were out there kind of panicked as the mob got to be a little bit unruly, and one thing led to the other, as they say.
Yeah.
But given that it's got such a place of primacy in American history, you would expect that, there would be some sort of like, monument or a plaque or something, because, we still have Boston and we know where it happened, right? And we're not talking about the Parthenon. We're not talking about 2,500 years. We're talking about, a couple of hundred years.
Yeah.
And then when you go to where the Boston Massacre happened, it's in the middle of traffic. And it's a small circle of stones that's sort of like on a little pedestrian island. So, there's a crosswalk, and then you walk out into the middle of like 4 or 5 lanes of traffic, and there's cars flying around you everywhere. And then and then you stand in the middle of these circle of the stones, and if you read beforehand that that's what that is, then you know. And if you didn't know, then you'll never know, right? So it's so when you're talking to an American audience and you start talking about the Elgin marbles, we're on a different planet from you, right? Because it's like, the idea of a fight, we're looking at it like, oh, we're going to throw it all in the trash anyway, so who cares who has it, right?
Yeah. No, that's fair enough, but I mean that's a choice that you don't always have to make,
Oh, I agree. Yeah, no, you certainly don't.
Yeah. Whereas I don't see any choice being given to people to make contemporarily when it comes to antiquities in the British Museum.
Yeah. The other example that we have is that's also a negative example would be I don't know if you've heard about the issue that we have with the company Hobby Lobby.
No.
Well, this is a little bit of an aside, but not really, right? I think it's still sort of related to what we've been talking about. But we have a very big company here that's called Hobby Lobby, and this is a like an arts and crafts, kind of store. And the owners of this Hobby Lobby are very, very devout evangelical Christians. So they wanted to make a museum of the Bible. And in doing this museum, making this museum, and of course this is funny to you because, well, we'll get into it later, but I mean, we
Why are you telling me these things? I can't stop now.
Well, part of the problem is that they've actually acquired quite a number of illegally looted artifacts from Iraq and from all over the Middle East to get into their museum. And it turns out, after the fact, after they've spent, all the, hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars on all of these antiquities, that a good percentage of them were acquired illegally and they were forced to return them. So at least the story had a happy ending that, these people don't, get to keep all this stuff. But I think it does highlight that this is a major problem still, right? And that antiquities trafficking is actually real. It's not something like from the movies.
That's like
of course, and it always implicates two parties, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And there is the buyer, there is the one that the material will end to, but initially there is the person that is willing to do the deed, which is like sometimes more important than the buyer.
Yeah, either criminal gangs or people who don't know any better, or who knows.
They don't, locals, okay? They don't care, whatever.
Yeah, and that's interesting too, because this is also, how much of a problem do you think that is in Greece? When if you're out and you're a farmer, in the Peloponnese, and you're working your field and you happen to dig up a bust, or you happen to find antiquities, do you get the sense that most people will go and contact the authorities, or is it like 50-50, or what
I want to believe that. I really want to believe that. I don't think that looting at the moment is happening as much as it did post World War II in Greece, or even earlier. I think people now have maybe cultivated a respect for this, and they even know more about it. Okay, they have access to information more easily, and they also know that, to be honest, there's not much money to be made out of this as it has been in the past, because you're getting into so much danger in order to win what, like 10,000 euros, 20,000 euros, I don't know. Because if this piece would have to be consumed through the black market, okay? Because if it ends up in any museum and goes on auction, at some point they will realize how this material ended there, okay? So of course we've seen things happening with many auction houses the last decade, but they are trying to be more and more careful when it comes to particularly looted antiquities. So you need to know where the material derives from. So yet again, if I find the statue, to whom am I going to sell it? How am I going to find the buyer? If I'm a farmer, it's different if I'm the criminal, let's say, and I've heard that at that place there is money to be made, and so I go there and start digging during nighttime or something. And it's different if I am the man that owns the place himself or herself.
Yeah,
I think it's not as easy as we think.
Yeah. It's not. I think you're 100% right. one other question that has always sort of bothered me about that is, do you think that there's some kind of like, do you think that there's some kind of tension between, especially maybe, you know, not recently, but I think just sort of like historically in Greece, that, you know, if you are a farmer, and let's say that you're a farmer and it's, the 1830s, you know, it is around the time of, you know, independence, you know, are you looking at things that you might dig up in your backyard as that farmer, and you're saying, oh, this is some kind of like, you know, demonic, you know, devil worshiping stuff? You know, pagan artifacts are not really part of the identity of, you know, of an Orthodox Christian, and it's something that we don't really care about because this is, you know, predating the era of Christianity. And, you know, and
For which period are we talking again? Exactly 1930s?
no, 1830s, like
1830s.
Yeah. Or
I don't think so. That would be the case, just because historically, when we had Ottoman Empire no more in Greece, what happened was that people, let's say, that were in charge after that war were trying to Hellenize everything again. Let's put it in this manner, okay? And one way to do that was to remind to the Greeks the greatness of their past. That would happen through religion and Byzantium, but also through classical history, right? So I don't think that if they saw this stuff, if the farmers saw this stuff, they would be, oh, you know, pagan. No, I'm Christian. No, I think the opposite. Because it's already cultivated. Okay, of course, you know, to some people maybe it wasn't cultivated, and they didn't give a about it. So they would be like, oh, stone, whatever. I don't care. What matters to me is how am I going to have, you know, some food for my family this afternoon.
Right. Yeah, it is always, that is one of the things that has always been fascinating to me about Greece, you know, modern Greece, but even, you know, the Greece of I could say like the modern period, right? You know, from you know the end of the Ottoman Empire forward, is that it is such a rich tapestry, and there are many different currents, you know, going through Greek society that are just endlessly fascinating to me. In a way that, you know, we can have a hard time understanding, especially in the United States, just because we don't have anything like it.
I mean, I still have a hard time understanding, and I'm up from there. Don't worry. Okay.
That's fair enough.
Learning is an ongoing process, my friend. It never stops.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, all right. So you actually spent a good deal of, so after the Agora, you ended up going to work on another project, and this time in the Cyclades, and I know that led to your move to the UK, and also led to your going back into academia again.
Yes.
So how influential, I mean, aside from those major life changes, obviously this is influential for you, but I mean, how has your study of Cycladic art actually influenced your work as an artist in general, or has it?
So stylistically, not at all. But when it comes to materials, a lot. Because when I did the master's at the University of Sheffield in cultural materials, basically, that's how this particular thing was called. And the more I learn about this type of pigments, the more I want to use them, and the more I know how to use them, basically. And the more admiration I have for how these materials came to be used to begin with. Because the more you look into it, you realize that this thing is a very important process by itself. When, for example, when we first start seeing the use of azurite in the Aegean during the, I want to say, late Neolithic, early Bronze Age, it doesn't come as a surprise that at the same point you have start of some type of metallurgical processes, right? So azurite is a copper ore. And so azurite in some form, let's say, enters this horizon and it becomes pigment and it becomes metal as well. It becomes a dagger, basically. So it has been really interesting to me to see how some materials are indeed interconnected with other technologies, technological processes, basically.
So if it's a copper ore, does that mean that it's like a green color? Or
it can vary. So if it is like copper carbonate, it would be a color. If it is, what's the other? Let me see. I have them here open for us. Because I don't want to forget, right? La la la. Yeah, so copper carbonate is azurite. And then you have malachite, which is another mineral form of this copper ore. I'm sorry, I cannot find it at the moment.
That's okay.
But you get this in many forms, okay? So you have like even combinations of both. So you would have one and the other. Wherever you would find azurite, you would probably find malachite as well, or I don't know, whatever, another ore which contains copper in some form, basically.
And for those who don't already know, when we're talking about the Neolithic and the late Bronze Age, when exactly are we talking about in terms of like dates?
In terms of dates, again, I am not very well prepared for this. But let's say early Bronze Age, 5,000 years ago.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough.
Basically, more or less.
Yeah, and I know that the Greek Dark Ages, to put things into perspective, right? The Greek Dark Ages are probably around 1000 BC, so maybe 3000 years ago. So, if we say, when we're talking about the Bronze Age and the Neolithic, we're talking about, quite a long stretch of time, and really in the remote past from us, right? So,
yes, but for instance, it changes from country to country. So right. If we talk about the Bronze Age in Britain, the dates are different. Okay, they have some. There is some particular time which both go forward in time parallelly, but they don't begin at the same time, basically, or at least that's what we know at the moment. Right. I mean, and I think the same can be true for like. When we start talking about, especially when we're talking about this, very, very early human history, we're talking about, phenomenon like the invention of agriculture, like settled agriculture, people sitting down on a farm, the concept of that came to different people at different times in the same way that, working metal came to different people at different times in the same way that writing came to different people at different times. So it's it can be confusing sometimes because the way that it's written, or the way that I learned it anyway in sort of high school textbooks, you get the idea that that humanity has entered the Bronze Age and some sort of switch is flipped and everybody has the information on how to make bronze, and everybody's doing it at the same time, but that's not at all how it worked. No. But I think these things. That's why you have the Chalcolithic period. Okay, so because some things, so you have the final Neolithic, which is up to 3,200 BC or whatever, and Chalcolithic, and then you go to the Bronze Age. Because this is yet again, this is an artificial narrative that we have created as historians or people that study archaeology and so on and so forth. It doesn't mean that because we give this title to it now, this is exactly how it's happened. This is suggested by the evidence up to now, but we don't know what the future holds. So
yeah, there's always a chance that we're going to unearth new evidence in the next, series of digs wherever we go, and it is going to have to change the way that we understand the current model, right? I mean, this is another one of those things where I get incredibly aggravated listening to pseudo-archaeology. I don't know if you encountered this too much, but there are many people out there who are, it's the same kind of like conspiracy theory type thinking that people
bring
apply.
it on, man. What do they say?
Well, people who are saying, there's people who want to make the argument that I don't know, that Atlantis was actually a real civilization, and that it was wiped out by asteroid impact 10,000 years ago, and that there's all kinds of advanced civilizations that came tens of thousands of years ago, but we don't have any evidence because they're at the bottom of the ocean, or we do have the evidence, but all of the archaeologists are afraid to give you the real evidence because they're trying to keep it secret to protect themselves and protect their academic positions and their reputations, and on and on. There's all kinds of craziness out there. Even before the age of disinformation that we live in, there was crazy conspiracy theories going on that were like this. And I've always said in response, that people like you and me would love to be proven wrong about this, or love to uncover new evidence that shows us like a totally different understanding of how the Bronze Age collapse happened, right?
Oh, okay. Now, okay. Look, I'm gonna go and get some water and be right back.
Okay. I touched a nerve.
Give me just a second.
Go for it.
There you are. How the Bronze Age collapsed, we don't know. Okay, nobody knows. We can say, well, I've read, I don't know, more than 4 or 5 theories about it, but I don't know. I don't know, because it's difficult to suggest a holistic idea about what happened throughout the Mediterranean and the Fertile Crescent in Egypt at this particular period. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe people that say that climate change played a role. Maybe. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, a combination of climate change has become a very hot topic, and especially talking about what we were, or I should say, referring back to what we were talking about beforehand, right? About the idea that whatever we're going through in our modern lives has an influence on the way that we interpret history. I never really understood that until we started seeing all of the climate change papers coming out, where it's a very, very, and it's a fascinating field of inquiry, because it's, there is evidence that, even little minute changes in the climate, throughout history have had major impacts, in like through pre-modern history writ large. I mean, not just going back to the Bronze Age collapse, but there's many other examples. There's like the Little Ice Age during the medieval period, and
of course, yeah, definitely. Like if you have a great period of drought, and the systems back then, one can say that they are very fragile and very, they can be influenced by weather phenomena really easily. Then, yes, that might trigger a collapse, but when I think this with my small brain and with a very, very little I know, I would state that there has to be a combination of things. And not only one and the other. Mostly it's going to be like a chain reaction of things, that one led to another, to another, to another, to another. Because many states, which is true, you have evidence of structures that have collapsed. You have like fire layers, you have things like that throughout the eastern part of the Mediterranean, but they didn't just, this didn't just, it wasn't Armageddon, okay? I think it was a period of, it might have taken 10 or 15 years, who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, because when you date things, you can only go that far and be you can be somewhat accurate, but up to which point?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, because we this is like again, we learned this in the Agora when you go into if you forgive me here for a second, but I mean, I'll if you remember, there's that whole area in Beta Zeta where I wanted to get nerdy for a second here, but if you go to that part of the Agora, right, and dig, you can find, what we call the Persian destruction layer.
I remember that, yes.
Yeah, and that is a well-documented, well spread out layer that, really exists all the way around the Acropolis. It's not just in Beta Zeta, but it's, it's everywhere. If you dig for it, you'll find it eventually. And it just so happens that we can pinpoint that because we know from literary sources and from inscriptions and from everything else, we know about what the Persian Wars were exactly, and indeed we can find all kinds of like signs of violent struggle in the area. But for the Bronze Age, you don't really have that. We don't have you don't
have written language, at least not in the form we have it in later periods, basically. So.
Yeah, there is no equivalent. There's no Bronze Age Herodotus to explain to us, what.
But you have. I think in the place of Herodotus, you have wall paintings and sculpture and architecture, and then you have linear scripts.
Yes.
But up to then been used for different reasons, basically.
Yeah.
Not for telling, stories about past things, basically. Past struggles, if you want. I think it's more of a verbal tradition that is happening at that period.
Yeah. There's a robust literature on this. I know that I've not really. This is not really my area of expertise. So I don't get into it too much. But I mean, I think that you can't help but be exposed to this material when you decide that you want to do archaeology in Greece, right? Or if you want to get into Greek philology at all, you want to learn ancient Greek. Which, by the way, if I'm not wrong, is compulsory in Greece, is it not?
So it was up to some point in high school. I think the first grade of high school was compulsory, and then you had to choose a trajectory, basically, if you want the technological trajectory or the classical trajectory, let's say. And if you choose the latter, you would have to learn fluent ancient Greek and Latin in order to pass the Pan-Hellenic exams. If you wanted to be a philologist or study history or archaeology, you had to go through that trajectory. So yeah. It's
such a it's very, very difficult for me to grapple with the idea of that, just because, again, part of the reason why we decided to do this podcast is because the classics, as we understand it in the U.S., is under threat, and not just the U.S., but I think also in the U.K. It's certainly under threat.
Archaeology in general.
Archaeology in general, right? Is there's a real turning away from this kind of pursuit, and yet, it will never really, as far as I know, I don't think it's ever really going to completely go away, because there are going to be these, there are going to always be countries that want to invest in it. It's just that, the center of where this kind of thing is studied, is going to move, ever inward. I think if we lose the classics in the English-speaking world, it's not to say that you'll never get to go and do it. It's just that, you might have to learn Italian or German or whatever, and then go there, right? Or Greek, and then go to Greece.
That's a very interesting thing, because I have thought about it many times, and I just don't understand why you would want to get rid of this thing. I don't get it. Like, I haven't heard a plausible explanation up to now as to why universities and governments want to get rid of archaeology and classics and the study of the past. Well, I mean, one can state that it's obvious why, And I'm like, is it though? I don't know.
I argue that it is if you take a very, very narrow view of things, right? And for those of you who haven't heard season 1, episode 1, you can go back and listen to my argument for why, right? Why I think classics is under threat, and I haven't totally covered all of the reasons why. I've covered part of the reasons why. I think the most obvious reasons why, and that is because if you're looking at an education. If you're looking at a university education, a post-secondary education, as a money-making proposition, if you're looking at it as this is something that we do in lieu of trade school, right? That trade school is a blue-collar phenomenon. Trade school is what you do when you're working class. You go to school and you learn a trade and then you get a job. But then the equivalent of that for the white collar is the university, right? You're going to go and you're going to get like a better trade and get a job. But I don't think that's how it works in practice, right?
I think you might be right.
But, this is another one of those things where if you can't coherently defend the practice of this from the inside, it doesn't make me particularly confident that we're going to be able to survive in the long term. So I'm hoping that that this will at least move the needle a little bit, and I guess we'll find out. Time will tell.
Look, the reason I don't understand it is the following: this capitalistic system wouldn't have reached the point that it is now without the classics, okay? So, like, posh boys that go to private schools and do ancient Greek for kick, it's just like a very, very known example of people that are now govern countries, okay? So why it's part of their culture as well, not just the culture of the plebs that want to study archaeology, right? So why? Maybe that would be the end of them. Maybe in doing so, they would sign up their own death. I don't know.
I don't know either. I mean, I really don't know. I mean, there is being knowledgeable about world culture, I think, is a good thing.
Of course, it is, absolutely.
And the more that we learn about all ancient cultures and how they interacted. A perfect example of that would be, that Bronze Age collapse we were just talking about. The Aegean Bronze Age is a web, it's a system, right? And you're talking about not just Greece, but you're also talking about ancient Egypt. You're talking about, the Mesopotamian city-states and empires that arose there. the Babylonians. I mean, just on and on.
And all the way really
Balkans, Italy, and maybe a bit further to the north and to the west.
Sure.
You have people travel. Okay, people travel since very early. It's not. They don't need sails to travel, and even if they do have boats or they don't have boats, it doesn't matter. They will still find a way to move from one place to another. So they travel much earlier than we were taught in school that they do, let's say.
And we even, just to drive that point home, that is true even in the Americas, where there's evidence of long distance trade routes through Mexico. For like 1,000+ mile journeys, that people would take from Mayan city states to places like Teotihuacan. And I mean, that is a human activity. That is not, nobody has a monopoly on that.
No, of course. And it would happen in the same manner that happens today. So, that doesn't necessarily mean that I want to go from place A to B to travel and take with me this material. It doesn't mean that I have to do all of this route. What it means is that I take this merchandise to the next place, and the next place will travel it to the third one, and from the third one would reach the point to be. So materials travel, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the initial traveler goes with the materials up to the end point.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, that is a critical point to make, and again, that's one of those things where I don't know that you. I don't think I would have come to that conclusion independently had it not been for my experience in the classics.
It's
me neither.
It's not necessarily obvious, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Well, I think that we've actually solved it, and that as a result of this conversation, the downward trend will immediately reverse, and that we're going to be hailed as heroes forever after, because we were able to convince world governments and societies and everywhere that the classics is worthwhile, and we should definitely keep on funding it and doing it. What do you say?
Fantastic. Exceptional. I'm so happy.
Yeah, no, me too. So do you have any final thoughts, or do you have anything else that you'd like to add before we put a bow on this thing? Believe it or not, we've gone for quite a bit of time. I believe it's.
No, I think we just didn't even touch the tip of the iceberg here. What's happening?
It's yet another 1.5 hour long conversation with between two nerds, huh?
Maybe like a couple or 3 hours. I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you what. Next time we do this, let's go ahead and do it not for podcasting purposes, but maybe over a little uzaki and some mezes, and we do it in Greece. What do you say?
Well, you know where to find me. You know where I live, anyways.
That's true. I do.
Both in Sheffield and in Athens. So
That's right. Well, Maria, it's been a pleasure. I thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for taking the time. I really do think that these conversations are useful, and I think that people are going to very much be interested in what you have to say in your perspective. It's a very interesting, unique perspective you have. So
thank you so much. Thank you. I'm happy you enjoyed it. I did as well.
All right. Then we'll see you. All right.
See ya.